this report is not just any other sort of an industry slash market report. This is more of a staffing perspective on consumer durables and electronics as an industry. So we believe it's the first of its kind. What we've tried to do really is to analyze the workforce in this industry, because this is one of the biggest contributors to the GDP of our country, and it employs a very large workforce, which numbers into several lakhs. And TeamLease is one of the, if not the largest player in this space, and hence we've used a lot of our primary data to glean some insights into some of the demographics, the behavioral patterns, and also what could be the business impact of not being able to really optimize your people supply chain in this industry. Yeah. So to begin with, number one, from a demographic standpoint, this may come as a surprise for some people, but in this industry, especially among the store promoters, which is what we've taken as the primary set of people for this analysis, only 6% are women, 94% are men. That's a very unfortunate statistic. But more than it not being an attractive industry for women from a working condition standpoint, it is more to do with the product categories themselves, which don't really lend themselves to be very attractive to women. So, for example, many of these store promoters usually work in modern trade outlets, which could be in organized locations such as malls or maybe big markets, etc. So they are relatively safe environments, and it's not really very demotivating or discouraging or deterring for women to work there. But then right next door in a lifestyle or apparel or fashion outlet, you would find more women, right? So it's more to do with the product categories. Unlike in FMCG, where it is more to do with working conditions, which dissuades women from joining the workforce. That's one important data point. Secondly, the south of India accounts for nearly half of this workforce. Yeah, well, in terms of population, southern India is actually a smaller fraction of the entire population of the country. But when it comes to market demand in terms of workforce required, it's nearly half though. The reason for that is because many of the southern states have significantly high disposable incomes. Most of the states have percentage of population below poverty line and single digits, etc. And that sort of reflects in the demand for the workforce in these places as well. Another important aspect is that you might imagine that for products like these discretionary goods, as we call them, bulk of the workforce would be employed in metros, which is actually not true, because the percentage of people who work in tier 1 locations is nearly twice as many as the people who are employed in metros. Besides these, it's important to note that around 5% of the workforce are tried every month, right? And that's a tremendously high figure for an industry which is relatively quite stable and mature and has been around for several decades now. The reasons are plentiful, but some of the correlations that we have seen are, one, younger people tend to leave more often, right, than not. The average age of people who are tried is significantly lower than that of people who are actively working in the system. So is the average tenure, which is also lower for people who have tried it. And secondly, the average salaries and significantly the average incentives earned by people who have tried it is also lower than that of people who are currently working in the system. And when I say it is significant, it really is significant. So the salaries could be lower by 10 to 20%, but the incentives seem to be lower by 50%, right? So it is not just the fixed salary, but the likelihood of and the quantum of incentives, right, which truly make the difference. And this has also been corroborated not just by the data, but also by findings in some of the calls that we have made, the exit interviews that we have made to the candidates who have left as well. They made it very clear that they are simply shifting to a different opportunity for better incentives primarily more than anything else. So based on all these data points, we've tried to put together what could be the cost of attrition, right, to an organization. So if the average attrition per annum is in the range of about 57%, about 5% a month, the manpower cost will be in the range of about 3 to 4 crores. Like I said, in terms of manpower cost, right, just for rehiring, retraining, and getting them to productivity, that will be an additional investment. But the opportunity cost in terms of lost business, right, would be upwards of 100 crores. Yeah. And this analysis has been conducted for a typical mid-sized consumer durables organization with about 1,000 store promoters. So With 1,000 people at these levels of attrition, you stand to lose more than 100 crores of business. And usually the ratio is something like this. If you have deployed 1,000 people in your workforce as store promoters, then your annual revenue would typically be in the range of about maybe 1,500 crores to 2,000 crores or so. So if you lose more than 100 crores out of that, that's a pretty significant chunk. Yeah. Yeah. So like I said, I mean, 57% is the average. There are some who have been able to keep their attrition to much lower than that. There are some who are facing attrition levels even higher than this. In fact, a couple of organizations have attrition levels close to 100%, right? So they churn the entire workforce in a year's time. So different people are facing this challenge to different degrees, right? Now, we have also included 3 case studies of some of our largest customers as to how they have tried to tackle this problem. So to your point, yes, for a couple of thousand rupees, they shift. You can't really blame them for it, right? So, and typically these opportunities happen to be available to them in the same store. Just that they have become the promoter for a different brand in the same store or maybe a nearby store, right? So the working conditions do not change at all for them. Yeah, you do the same thing and you earn more, so why wouldn't you shift? Yeah. So it begs that question. Now, coming back to the case studies as to how some employers have tried to combat this and very effectively as well. Uh, One case study is to do with arresting the problem at source, right? A lot of employers have now come to realize that poaching from competition is not sustainable at all. Yeah, because just because a person has been successful selling products of a different brand doesn't mean he or she will necessarily be successful selling your brands, right? Because your brand positioning, your brand salience, etc., could be very different from what it could be for that particular organization, right? So even if it's the same store, there is no guarantee. Secondly, you poach this person, he comes and joins, he's going to be very expensive for you, and tomorrow he could get poached by another brand as well, right? So what ends up happening is it's the same person who keeps doing rounds within the same industry and just raises the cost everywhere without necessarily increasing the productivity. You may end up getting the same outcomes for all you know, right? So companies have now realized that it's important for you to maybe create a fresh pool of talent rather than just keep poaching, right? Because this chain has to end somewhere. Now, for doing that, they've also come to realize now that it's important for you to ensure that you have to get people with the right mindset rather than the right skill sets. Yeah, because if they don't have the right skill sets, it is okay, you can train them, but they need to have the right mindset, because sales is not everyone's cup of tea, right? Especially consumer sales. Yeah. Whereas another kind of sales where, for example, in FMCG, you go store to store and you take orders, right? That is a combination of push and pull, right? Whereas this, which is where you are facing direct consumer sales, it's called sellout, right? It's actually, in my opinion, it is harder to do. Yeah, because on the same shop floor, you are competing with multiple other brands who may have other different features or which might be cheaper, so on and so forth, right? So in my mind, this is harder, which also probably explains why sales promoters and consumer durables are paid more than feet on street salespeople in FMCG, right? Because here it is more of push and less of pull, especially for the mid-tier and low-tier brands. Now, if you're able to get people with the right mindset, that is people who are oriented towards selling, right? Then you have a really, really good chance of training that person, imparting the right sort of functional skill sets, and trying to make them productive in a short span of time. If they are not a good fitment for sales, no matter how much functional training you give them, they are not going to be successful. Yeah. So for this, some of our client organizations have implemented psychometric assessments. This is just to test their fitment in a sales role, right? As long as they get a pretty good score, which is neither too high nor too low, because if it's too high, then chances are they may be over ambitious and they may leave within few months, right? It could be overqualified. If they score too low, then they're just not a good fit. So it has to be at an ideal sweet spot. So we filter out candidates basis that, and only those candidates get deployed. It's a necessary precondition towards getting an offer letter, right? So that is one thing which has helped really well, because if I further qualify this data of attrition, infant attrition, which is the percentage of people who join and leave within 6 months, yeah, is extremely high. It accounts for half, if not more than half of all of the attrition, right? So you really need to nurture them in the first 6 months. So for that, the first condition is to get the right fit of people in the system. That's one. Secondly, which is another case study which you have spoken about, is to have comprehensive training programs for all of these people. It's a combination of One, having a managed training services program where you deploy, where as an organization, we have actually deployed a network of our trainers pan-India at various locations to physically deliver training services to the promoters. That is one. Secondly, we've also created digital training content, right, which has also been shared across the apps that these people use, so that on an ongoing basis, we'll be able to train them. This could be for new products or new categories that get launched periodically, or this could even be for new schemes that get launched as well, right? So it has to be a combination of high touch and high tech. It cannot be just one or the other. And this is the suite of services we've offered from a training, engagement, and productivity standpoint post deployment of people, right? So that is number two. Number three, which is the third case study we've included, is about an organization which has come up with a retention bonus, right? By restructuring their salaries and parking a portion of their salaries towards what we call as retention bonus. Yeah, they were able to retain them until the end of the crucial festive season period. Now, if you stay back until the end of the festive season period, you will get this paid out, as a New Year bonus on December 31st, along with your salary, which actually accumulates into a pretty significant amount. If you leave sometime in between, well, you don't get anything, right? So this was not easy to do, of course. We had to firstly drive a lot of conviction among these people that, hey, you know what, whatever you were earning until now in terms of the take home salary will remain the same, just that we are parking a separate amount towards the retention bonus. You want to get your hands on it, you got to stay back. Yeah. So this helps organizations to be able to retain crucial talent until the end of the festive season, because that is when they need that continuity. See, it is not just about retaining people, getting productivity out of them and so on and so forth, but this also helps serve the end consumers as well, right? Now, the point is, if there is a lot of attrition that happens, across organizations before the festive season, it simply means that when you walk into a store during festive season, there is a chance, right, that there is person A who's trying to sell product X, but until yesterday he was selling product Y. So he may not be able to position the product well to you either. So the consumer experience goes for a toss as well, right? So the whole ecosystem gets impacted because of attrition. It's not just a problem that is isolated to the employers alone, but it affects the entire ecosystem, including and especially the end consumers as well, right? Which is why we have tried to do all these things. And in fact, through all of these three case studies, we have tried to illustrate that the organizations in questions, our clients specifically, have been able to derive significant benefits through this. Some of the organizations were able to even halve their attrition, especially during a 4 or 5 month period in between, right? Which is when it really matters to them. So yeah, I think rather than submitting to the fact that attrition is the reality, we will have to accept it and deal with it. We have to proactively take some preventive and corrective measures to ensure that you are able to mitigate the impact of attrition as much as you can. Yeah, that's a pertinent question that you raised. So unfortunately, um, many of the organizations in this space are actually used to just poaching from competition, right? But we need to now realize that the numbers of people required in total now compared to, let's say, 5 years ago is significantly higher, and there is only so many experienced people around, right? So by trying to poach existing talent, the only thing that's ending up happening is that the cost of these people is going up without any increase in productivity, right? This is just not useful to anybody, because ultimately if the cost goes up significantly, the end consumers are the ones who have to bear this cost ultimately, right? Because it's going to get passed down to them. Yeah. So there is absolutely no value creation that is happening, but it's just leading to inflation, right? So number one problem is that there is a perception of limited talent that is available in the market, right, by these organizations, but that is not true. As you said, we need to actually not over-index ourselves so much on technical skills, because that can be taught. As you said, it's extremely important for us to look at the softer aspects, such as, do they have really good communication skills? Do they really have the chops to do a sales job? Yeah. Which is why it's extremely important for us to look at people who have these intrinsic skills rather than extrinsic skills, because for all you know, if you just hire people who have technical skills or relevant experience, etc., they may actually saturate very soon, right? Because they may not have the other intrinsic skills which are required for them to scale up in the future. It's a short-term fix, essentially. It's not a solution at all. So there is this, like I said, the number one challenge is that there is this self-imposed perception of shortage of qualified manpower, but that is not true, right? It can be addressed by several ways which are which we have actually made possible. There is a hire train deploy model that we have positioned. There are pre-onboarding psychometric plus soft skills assessments that we have brought into place. There are also post-onboarding comprehensive training programs, content creation services, periodic assessments, and so on and so forth, which can all be put together to make sure that the productivity is not really as much of a problem as it's perceived to be. The second problem is that uh, it's becoming increasingly harder for organizations in this space to attract the younger workforce. Right? The reason for that is because the sales role or this particular sales promoter role is not really perceived to be something that leads anywhere. Right? It's perceived to be a dead end role, and that is true as well. Right? In fact, I'll give you a data point. If you are hired as a sales promoter, you will actually most likely end up making more money than an entry level software engineer in an ITES organization, right? But try going to a top engineering college, position yourself as somebody hiring for an ITES organization versus somebody hiring for a store promoter role. Where do you think students are going to join? The ITES role, right? The pay might be lower, but they feel that number one, with the store promoter role, there is a social stigma associated even today. It's not perceived to be a white collar role. They feel that it's kind of a blue collar role. It may not be. That's not the point here, but it's perceived to be lower in the social strata. That's one. Secondly, they feel that I join as a store promoter, I'm going to die as a store promoter. I don't really see any growth for me further on from here, right? And it's sort of nebulous. It's not very clear as to what their future is going to be like. So organizations really need to do a much better job of positioning this role as a role with a future, right? Because there are so many cases we have ourselves seen where somebody who started out as a store promoter has actually gotten elevated to a supervisor, and then to a branch manager, and then to a regional manager and a zonal head as well. So over a period of 10 years or so, this person's salary rose by some 20 times, right? That doesn't happen every day, but it does happen. Yeah, you just need to believe it, that it's possible. Of course, such cases might be rare, but there are organizations which have taken a firm foot forward in ensuring that long-term growth and development opportunities are not only made available, but the people are also made aware of the same, right? So being able to attract, I would say, Gen Z is proving to be very challenging for them. So that's another issue that they are facing, because even today the kind of people who are getting onboarded for these kind of roles are not graduates. That's another finding in the report. You would see that more than 60% of the people in the industry right now performing these roles are below the level of graduation in terms of their education qualification. That's a sad state of affairs. Yeah. So I would say these are the top two challenges for sure from a people standpoint. Thirdly, which is a derivative impact, is there is an increasing challenge with respect to productivity. Right now, the thing is, they know for a fact that if you don't really have a store promoter in a highly competitive environment, your product is not going to sell. Right? You may go into a store with brand A and B in your mind, but if brand A and B don't have a representative in the store, Mahrukh, and if let's say brand C has a representative, you will be converted on the spot. Trust me. I'm sure it has happened with you, because it's happened with me many times as well, right? So they know that for you to not miss out on sales, you have to have a person, right? So it's a catch-22 situation. You have to have a person so that you don't miss out on sales. But then if you have a person there, then you need to solve for their productivity and the opportunity cost and so on and so forth. So it's a question of, like I said, productivity versus opportunity cost, right? You don't have a person, you're going to miss out on sales. But if you have a person, is he productive in the sense, are you really able to generate margins from that sale, right? So that classic conundrum is there, and it's gotten accentuated off late, because there are a lot of new brands which have made a foray in the market off late, and it's become more competitive now than it's ever been. Yeah. So this will continue. I think until such time as a steady state is reached, this will definitely continue. Companies will try and invest in people as much as they can, and then over a period of time they'll figure out what is really working where, and they'll just retain their investments in those markets or in those stores, and they'll pull out people from the other stores or have a different kind of strategy for selling there. So this is what we see happening in the immediate future. Yeah, so the first two challenges are where, out of the three that I mentioned, are where actually we can support significantly, because one differentiator that we have, which sets us apart really, is the fact that we have an in-house skills university, right, which no one else has. So through our partnerships with various universities across the country, we are better placed to be able to provide qualified people. When I say qualified people, I'm talking about graduates, because graduates are a minority in this space. So by being able to provide graduates, you are able to supply people who have better intrinsic skills, right? All they need is functional/technical skills training, for which also we have a large enough ecosystem, and there are demonstrated cases of us having delivered that in the past as well, as we've written the case studies too. So it is an end-to-end life cycle management system, wherein we will not only help them source better quality manpower, but also create the right ecosystem of products and services to engage, train, and make them productive. Right? That is what really sets us apart. And of course, making sure that hygiene aspects, such as ensuring that their salaries, their remittances, etc., are all made on time, making sure that all of their queries, concerns, etc., are also addressed on a timely basis, etc. So that is hygiene, essentially, right? So in that, I think we are beyond question. So there is no problem with that at all for a long time now. That's already been established. But like I said, we don't really look at ourselves as somebody just providing payroll and compliance related services, because that is hygiene. For us, it's more of business partnership. We want to try and solve, and we have been for the most part trying to solve the people supply chain problems that our organizations are facing at large, and help them make a stronger case for productivity. Yeah, so India is a significantly underpenetrated market when it comes to many of these products. I would say that if you look at maybe smartphones, we are significantly well penetrated. So it's going to grow. If you look at the volume growth, it's going to be in single digits. You mentioned that in the report as well in smartphones, but the value growth is going to be tremendously high, because the average ticket size of products is going up. Premiumization is happening for sure. So that is one trend we've seen with respect to smartphones. When it comes to other consumer electronics, particularly TVs or displays as a category, is going to see significant growth again in terms of double-digit growth. Uh, if you look at consumer durables per se, you can classify them into small appliances, which is home and kitchen appliances, and then the large appliances. So large appliances typically are largely three significant categories. You have AC, refrigerators, and washing machines. Within large appliances, air conditioners are going to grow in the mid two digits range, that is between 10 and 20% over the next, let's say, 5 years or so, because it's significantly underpenetrated. And if this year's heat wave is any indication, then unfortunately we are heading into similar times in the future as well. So you need more of air conditioners in the future. In fact, even this year for that matter, there are companies which were able to get 30 to 50% incremental growth year on year compared to last year. And most, if not all, organizations we work with faced a stockout situation for air conditioners. Yeah. So, and that will continue to happen in the future as well. When I say 10 to 20% growth, I'm talking about the next 5 year period. So that's one. With respect to washing machines, that's probably going to be a little slow. Refrigerators, yes. Again, it's going to be in the high single digits or the low two digits, you can say. That's the kind of growth we are expecting overall from large appliances. Across the board, it's going to be on an average about 10% or so is what we foresee. Small appliances, not so much. It could probably be in the range of about 5 to 7% or so, because it's a question of adoption, use cases, and maturity of the industry as a whole as well. Right? There are various aspects. It's a pretty complex segment, I would say, within consumer durables. Yeah. So that's the overall outlook. I hope that gave you a perspective about the future of this industry.